Okay, guys, I'm here for a special double upload night. This is a rarity with me, but uh, since the WWE 2K17 roster reveal is over and we know what the final roster is, minus DLC, of course, other than the pre-order and the NXT edition DLC, I'm going to give my thoughts of the WWE 2K17 roster. This was the very first video I did on this channel was about the WWE 2K14 roster, so I kind of do this every year as an annual tradition. And then I'll tell you if I think this is how good the roster is after I read it to you. Here, by the way, is the entire roster. It's a page and a half. That's the front, back, and half of the next page. So it's between 137 to 138 on disc. That's quite a huge on disc roster starting. Now, I don't know how we're going to go about unlocking people, but I guess the NXT people will be unlocked through my career somehow, and Legends and Universe, I'm guessing. Unless they just start them all unlocked. Who really knows? But the superstars for the roster for WWE 2K17 is as followed. I will list this entire thing in the video description later. So that way, you can also see the full roster. We have Aiden English of the Vaudevillains. Okay, that's fine. They're not doing much right now, but they're a tag team that has potential anyway. 2, the most phenomenal addition to a WWE game, AJ Styles. Even though half his moves have been in the game for 5 years? If that. So, but he's finally in the game himself. Number 3, Alberto Del Rio, and now the game's outdated because he's gone. He has apparently left the WWE while on suspension from a wellness policy. So, he's back in the game. That's all well and good. Wonder if he's going to have his stupid Tree of Woe kick. 4, you're going to have some Twisted Bliss with Alexa Bliss. There's a nice addition to the Divas women's roster. Because Alexa Bliss is has potential to be a really good women's wrestler once she's groomed some more. Next is Alicia Fox. I didn't even know she was still employed, to be quite honest. I don't think anyone did. So next, it's Alundra Blayze, fresh off the WWE Hall of Fame and fresh off last year's DLC. Now she's on disc, which is odd because all the DLC from 2K15 got in 2K16, and all but 3 from 2K16 get in 2K17's on disc roster, and I'll get into that. 7, is Andre the Giant, the man who the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal was named after, even though it doesn't mean anything. Next up is Apollo Crews, don't call him Creed, and he's DLC for the NXT edition and will be available later for people who don't get the NXT edition. Like myself, because I'm not going to pay $100 for any video game, so, especially when I don't even care about half the stuff in that edition, and I don't even care about Nakamura either for day one. I mean, I like Nakamura, but he's not a massive part that I need to have in my universe, because this roster is big enough with my creations for me to deal with, so. Next up is the Enforcer Arn Anderson. Good to see him back in a WWE game, because this is only his 3rd WWE game. He was in WWE 12, 2K16 as DLC, and now he's here. This is only his 3rd WWE game ever. Next is the current NXT Women's Champion, Asuka. There's a great addition to the women's roster. Asuka's a very interesting character she'll be to play around with. Next up is Bam Bigelow, the Beast from the East. It's surprising he's still in here, quite frankly. Should be in the WWE Hall of Fame if you want my opinion, but you can't get everyone in it every year. Next, we have the winner of the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, the Lone Wolf, Baron Corbin. That's a nice addition. Next up, she's a hugger. It's Bayley making her WWE Games debut overall, and that's nice. Now all the 4 horsewomen can be official since they left this out last year. Up next, he's going to maintain the law, the order, and the justice of 2K17. It's the Big Boss Man. Not Attitude Era Big Boss Man, though. It's, Blue Shirt Boss Man. Hopefully he doesn't have Jai Soul Bro, though, like he did last year, because I would prefer, if you're going to do that Big Boss Man, take his most iconic theme song that he's got that's tied to that, and not Jai Soul Bro, which is more a Slick's theme. So, for the Big Boss Man, it's the Irish Lass Kicker, Becky Lynch. We got, he's not soft, he's Big Cass. Next up is 1/3 of the New Day, 1/3 of the WWE World Tag Team Champions, the New Day, who probably should lose the titles by now, but... Next up, it's the Big Show, who is irrelevant and hasn't even been on Raw since he was drafted there. That's almost a waste of a draft pick. Next up, it's Billy Gunn. Yeah, I don't know why he's here either. Well, I know why he's here because of an inclusion later, but what's the point? Next up, it's the Master of Believe, Bo Dallas, who hasn't been on Raw since he was drafted either, I don't believe. Next up, he's not a sucker, it's Booker T. Next up is the black sheep of the Wyatt family, the master of the squash match, Braun Strowman. Next up, it's Bray Wyatt, the guy who cuts a great promo but never wins a big match. Sad. Then it's Bret Hart, the most bitter guy in pro wrestling apparently, who doesn't like that people are rated higher than him in WWE games. Not that that matters, but hey. Next up, it's the loose cannon Brian Pillman. Always a favorite to play with. In the game. Then we got Brie Bella, who's fresh off retirement. So, yeah, she's retired now. So then we get the British Bulldog making his return to the WWE games. And now 2 straight games. That could be an omen for something. Maybe a WWE Hall of Fame induction later. Then we get this year's cover athlete, the Beast Incarnate Brock Lesnar. Even though he only appears like 4 times a year, if that. But so then we get Buddy Murphy. I guess because him and Blake aren't together anymore, they get their first names back. Then we get Butch of the Bushwhackers. The Bushwhackers are always a fun little team, fresh off being DLC last year. The WWE Hall of Fame seems to be doing wonders for people now, doesn't it? It's getting all kinds of people in games. Next up, it's the most dangerous face of Foley. It's the Bang Bang Master Cactus Jack. Next up, it's Staten Island Princess, who knows how to beat up Nikki Bella. It's Carmella. I made a rhyme. Next up is the King of Swing, Cesaro. Wonder if you'll have the James Bond entrance. Next up, it's one half of American Alpha. He's ready, willing, and Gable, Chad Gable. Next up, it's the Queen Bee herself, Charlotte. Or the Nature Girl, however you want to look at it. Next up, you're going to get the Gift of Jericho, and you better drink it in, man, because it's Chris Jericho. Up next, it's Captain Charisma and the Captain of the Peopleation, Christian. You ever think he gives out you think he gives his peeps, marshmallow peeps? So next up, it's Raw's Mr. Irrelevant, Curtis Axel, which kind of fits because he is irrelevant. Next up, Devon Dudley, the recently retired Devon Dudley, or at least from WWE anyway, because apparently they're taking an indie booking. It's nice to have the Dudleys back. Bubba Ray's here too. I missed him, but Bubba Ray's here. That's 2 more people to make this game outdated. So then we get the biggest botcher on the entire women's roster, Dana Brooke, who seriously should be back in NXT. She botches more than the original Sin Cara. And that's saying something, because that takes talent to be that bad. It takes talent to be that bad that you're botching more than the original Sin Cara did. Next up is the Flying Goat and the General Manager of SmackDown, Daniel Bryan. I expected that, really. Next up, it's Darren Young, who Bob Backlund's trying to make great again, although I would say just make him great at all, because he wasn't great before. Next up, it's one half of the Revival, Dash Wilder. The Revival are my favorite NXT tag team, so what I've seen of them in NXT, I love these guys. They'll be great additions to the tag roster. Next up is the WWE World Champion, the Lunatic Fringe, the Unstable Dean Ambrose. Next up, hey, it's him, it's Diamond Dallas Page. Next up, it's the artist formerly known as the Ego, now known as Primo. Next up, it's Big Daddy Cool Diesel. You got your diesel fuel ready? Next up, it's to show off himself, Dolph Ziggler. Although he hasn't shown anything off. I think the only show off he is people want to turn to show off half the time. Next up, it's Dude Love, baby. After Dude Love, it's the American Dween, baby, Dusty Rhodes. Up next, are you feeling the tremors and the earth shake? It's the earthquake. Up next, it's the rated R superstar, the ultimate opportunist, and all the other great nicknames. It's Edge. Next up, it's Emma, who's out of a back injury, and is the main reason Dana Brooke was called to the main roster too early. Emma's nice. Up next is the Smack Talk Skywalker himself, Enzo Amore. Him and Cass are a fun team, though. Up next, it's Eric Rowan of the Wyatt family, the second most useless one, at least by himself, like Braun Strowman. Up next is Miss All Red Everything, and no, I'm not going to do her long, overblown SmackDown entrance. I do not care about Eva Marie enough to do that. Eva Marie. So up next, it's Fandango. Up next, it's the artist formerly known as Fernando, who's back to being Epico. Next, it's the first ever Universal Champion, although I think the WWE might have erased him by now because of the injury. It's Finn Balor, the Demon King. Next up is our two pre-order bonuses, Goldberg WCW and Goldberg WWE. And no, I don't know why there are two Goldbergs at all. I don't know why we need two versions of them, but Clone War, I guess. Up next is one half of the Golden Truth. It's Gold Dust. Next up is the hottest free agent in the WWE. It's Heath Slater, baby. I wonder if he's going to bring his million kids with him. Up next, it's Hideo Itami, who just came off of injury after being gone, a year? And it looks like he's going to go into a feud of Boston Aries, which would be really interesting. Next up, it's Jack Swagger, who also, to my knowledge, hasn't appeared on Raw since being drafted. Raw's littered of people who have not appeared on that show since they were drafted. Whereas at least everyone on SmackDown has almost at least appeared once since being drafted. Next up, it's the Master of the DDT, Jake the Snake Roberts. Always good to see Jake the Snake in a game. Up next is the other half of American Alpha. He's also ready, willing, and Gable. It's Jason Jordan. Up next is the Wrestling God, JBL. At least he's not as cringeworthy in the game commentary as he is on WWE TV. Up next is Jey Uso. Followed by Jim the Anvil Neidhart and his brother and Jimmy Uso. I don't have jokes there, so most of these jokes aren't even jokes, so, Next up is the face that runs the place, John Cena. Up next, he's going to do a lot of lucha things. It's Kalisto. Next up, it's Demon Kane. I wonder if Corporate Kane will be DLC. Knowing 2K, they just might do that. Up next is the new Universal Champion, the Master of KO Mania, Kevin Owens. Up next is the second member of the New Day, Kofi Kingston. Up next, we got our first member of the Descension, Connor. Because until the Ascension ascends to something, they are the Descension. Because that's all they've done on the main roster, is descend down the card. Up next is the living legend, Larry Sabisco. I guess because he beat Bruno Sammartino and put him into retirement, he stole his nickname. Up next, are you ready to climb aboard the Lex Express? Because Lex Luger, in his third straight game now. Again, maybe that's an omen for a future Hall of Fame induction. Up next, it's Lita. A great woman for the women's roster. One of the all-time great WWE women of all time, actually. Next is the other Bushwhacker. It's Luke, who still looks like he could wrestle today at age 70. That's quite good that he kept himself in that much shape. Up next, it's Luke Harper, the Wild Eye member of the Wyatt family, who I'm guessing will be returning to SmackDown. I don't know. Nor do I care. He's going to go somewhere unless he quits the WWE, which is unlikely. Up next, it's Mankind. He's going to put Mr. Sacco down people's throats. Next up is the proprietor of the Hall of Pain, Mark Henry. Next up is the most must-see Intercontinental Champion in the history, The Miz, without Maurice, which is a shame. Next up is Mr. McMahon. That's expected. You can't have a WWE game without the McMahons because you can't have the WWE without the McMahons. They're the focal point of the company half the time. Next up, it's Mr. Perfect, one of the all-time great Intercontinental Champions, and a tremendous addition to this game. Next up, it's Naomi, who I think Jeff Hardy wants his entrance back. Next up, it's the Queen of Hearts, Natalya. Up next, the man that gravity forgot, who's probably chilling on Raw until September 19th when the Cruiserweights come so he can compete for the Cruiserweight Championship. It's Neville. Next up, it's the Queen of Squash Matches, Nia Jax, for the NXT edition as DLC. Next up, it's the face that runs the place's girlfriend. It's Mrs. John Cena. It's Nikki Bella. Up next is Paige, who may get fired because of Alberto Del Rio. I don't know. She hasn't been on Raw anyway because she's been injured, so I don't think it matters. Next up is the other half of the Golden Truth. R-Truth. I wonder if he's going to be playing Pokemon Go all the time. Next up is the Viper, Randy Orton. WWE mainstay at this point in games. Up next is the Macho Man, Randy Savage, snapping to a Slim Jim. Next up is the bad guy, the guy oozing machismo, Razor Ramon. Up next is the master of the figure four leg lock, Ric Flair. Then we have the ravishing one, Ravishing Rick Rude. Third straight game again. Could be an omen here. Next up is Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Half of my all-time favorite match ever of Ricky Steamboat and Randy Savage. Next up, it's the father of the Usos, the proprietor of the Stink Faces, Rikishi. Next up is the Road Dogg, Jesse James, and you better call somebody. Up next, even though he's in Hollywood and his name is Dwayne, he's still in the game. He's The Rock. Next up, it's the master of the Roman Empire, who nobody seems to like, Roman Reigns. Up next, it's Rusev. I'm guessing Lana will be a manager. Next is the underdog from the underground, Sami Zayn. Up next, making his on-disc debut, the former NXT champion, the SoCal submission specialist, Samoa Joe. Next up, WGK17 just got legit with Sasha Banks. Next up is the other half of the revival, Scott Dawson. Then we got Seth Rollins, the man, the future, the first round draft pick, the number 1 draft pick, or whatever he's calling himself nowadays. Next up, it's Shane McMahon. Is he going to jump off the Hell in a Cell again? Next up, it's the Heartbreak Kid Shawn Michaels, who super kicked Stan once. Next up, it's the bearded one, Sheamus, the Celtic Warrior. Next up, as part of the NXT package, Shinsuke Nakamura, the King of Strong Style. Then it's the other half of the Vaudevillains, it's Simon Gotch. Then we got the new Sin Cara, the one that's not the Botch Fest. Then we got Stardust. So it's the game out there with him, but I guess it's to complete the Rhodes family. Just, I guess. Next up, it's the Commissioner of Raw, it's Stephanie McMahon. Next up, it's only one Steve Austin, not several, although we might get the alternate versions as some attire or something else like that. Or they might actually be separate characters not revealed, I don't know. Next up, it's the Icon, the Vigilante, the Crow, the Joker, and whatever, it's Sting. Then we have Summer Rae, who also hasn't been on Raw since being drafted. I'm sensing a pattern of half of Raw's draft picks. Next up is Tamina, who I don't even know is employed or not. Up next is Tatsumi Fujinami, who's never worked for the WWE, but hey, he's in the WWE Hall of Fame, so he's in the game. Next up is Titus O'Neil, a guy who can't even who stumbles over his promos 3 times in 3 minutes and 30 seconds. Then we got Triple H. No surprise there. Then we got Trish Stratus, the greatest single woman's wrestler in the WWE history, even though she didn't start out like that. Next up is Yara Breezango, and the master of the selfie stick, it's Tyler Breeze. Then we got the other half of the Natural Disasters, the former Tugboat. He's not a Shockmaster, he's Typhoon. Then we got Tyson Kidd, who I think's got a career-ending injury, doesn't he? Which is a shame for him, but at least he's getting royalties on a video game. That's always nice. Next up, the mainstay of these games, now that he's back in the good graces of the WWE, the Ultimate Warrior. And speaking of mainstays, The Undertaker comes to WWE 2K17, which isn't a surprise either. So up next, it's going to be Vader time. It's always nice to have Vader time in a game. Should be in the WWE Hall of Fame. Second straight game, though. Next up is Wesley Blake. Again, he gets his first name back. Next up, it's Xavier Woods with Francesca. That's always nice. And finally, it's the master of the woo, Zack Ryder, who is missing his Hype Bros tag team partner. So there you have it, the WWE 2K17 roster. I think it's a very good roster. We got some surprise additions for NXT that I didn't think would be there. I would have liked to see Austin Aries make the main roster, but maybe their way of thinking was, since he debuted in ring at Takeover Dallas, maybe make him DLC. I'm guessing you'll have an NXT pack that's going to at least include him and Bobby Roode, and probably Ember Moon, to add to the other NXT edition wrestlers. Other than that, it's hard to judge the DLC other than, besides those guys, probably Anderson and Gallows, I imagine, will be DLC. And maybe even the Headbangers now, who knows? That would be odd, seeing the Headbangers in the WWE game in 2016. It's hard even to say that. It's hard even to see them on WTV in 2016. But, yeah. I think this is a very good roster. I think it's better than last year. Again, though, I want to know how the unlocking is going to work, because we don't have a showcase anymore. So, it's going to be very interesting to see how the unlocking works. But, when I edit the description of this video, which will probably be tomorrow or Sunday or sometime, I'll put the entire roster also in the description of this video. So if you like the video, like button down there, subscribe button down there, and thank you for watching. Bye.